I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Greet your neighbors.
That's after.
Set that forward for today's reflection.
Would you bow your heads with me? Father, we give you thanks for the glorious sunshine that we get to experience today. And even though it's not warm, there's something about a sunny day that just brightens the mood. Thank you for the food that we've just enjoyed, for this time of fellowship together, for this club, for the work that you have enabled us to do. Lord, work that enriches the community around us. We ask that you would bless our efforts to complete our mission. Father, help us to provide service to others, promote integrity, advance world understanding, goodwill, and peace through our fellowship as business, professional, and community leaders. Would we each seek to live our lives according to the four-way test, Lord? Would we be truthful, fair, show goodwill towards others, and work for the good of all? Would we learn much today? And would we walk away blessed, encouraged, and uplifted by this time together? And we ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Seth. Welcome Rotarians, welcome guests. Before we get to the Rotary member highlight, starting to run out of material here, so I put a couple slips on the table. If anyone hasn't turned in a Rotary member highlight, I'm sure we would all like to hear all about you. And the other risk you make is that I'll have you as a highlight and make something up about you. So if you haven't filled one of these out yet, fill them out, give them up to me. If you don't want to fill them out here, just email me. My email address is on there also. Okay, today's Rotary member highlight. This Rotarian is a photographer. She is the Director of Community Engagement at the Pregnancy Care Center. She has been a member of Wooster Rotary for 1 year. She lives in Worcester with her husband, Ryan, along with her 3 children, Adeline, Corbin, and Lincoln. This Rotarian was formerly lived in a much warmer state than Ohio, kind of like Hawaii. This Rotarian is Brianna Kreitz. Okay, we are having a new member orientation today, and we are meeting in the lobby out front there after today's meeting. So if you're part of the orientation, we're meeting out in the lobby. Again, broken record, December billings went out already. If you haven't received that by email, let me know. And I will now turn it over to Secretary Lynn.
Thank you, President Tom. And thank you to Donna Conley, who subbed last week. Very much appreciated for doing that for me while I was gone. Great news. We're going to welcome our newest member, Meredith Craig. Do you please stand? Meredith. Meredith was sponsored by Greg Long. She's our state representative, and she's a Smithville alum. Of course, I'm going to add that. Welcome, Meredith. Past President Don Noble has a traveling microphone. We'll start with Matt Yost.
My guest today is Matt Pia. Matt, may be a familiar name to you. He is the assistant boys lacrosse coach here at the high school. But a few months ago, he joined us at Hummel as a business insurance advisor working out of our Wooster office. Matt Pia.
Brent Rice.
Please welcome my friend Pete Philippon here as a guest and recently retired.
Donna Conley.
And my guest today is my husband, Ted. Here today because it's our son-in-law who is the speaker today.
And then, of course, our youth exchange students, Hannah, Esau, do you, either of you have?
Hi, I'm going to secretary, she's there from Ecuador. And the first thing you need to know about me is that I got into the high school. That's it. Yes, okay. I went on a brunch with my husband and my brother, and we watched the NFL game. And Saturday, I just sleep. And that's it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Very good, everyone. The only good news I have is that I'm alive. I have to do. I was able to move to another loving host family, the Dunlops. I do miss the Burdens a lot. Is Sarah there? It's okay. Yeah, I moved in on Monday, and I've been living with them for a few days. Friday, we just had like a spa day with those who struggle in Cleveland. We just had like foot masks and face masks. And then Saturday morning, I was sick. Sunday, I was sick. So I didn't actually go to it. But I'm here today.
We have one announcement from the podium, Phil Mariola, and while he's coming forward, I'd like to draw attention to the flyers on your table regarding great decisions. Great decisions is something Wooster Rotary has supported for many, many years. I think the first one is coming up a week from Thursday, February 6th. So would all encourage everyone to take a look at that and support it yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Lynn. I'm standing up here to invite you all to a party. Our annual wine and bourbon tasting is back and bigger than ever. The date this year is Thursday evening, March 6th, at Greystone Event Center. As in the past, we are featuring wines from around the world. But this year we have a special portfolio of wines that will be poured by the winemaker. There will be a bourbon table with serving all new selection of bourbons chosen by Brian and Olivia Boyer. And there will also be some very highly sought after tequilas. This year, our goal is to make this fun event into a revenue generating event for the club. Many of our members from this club have generously offered their support already by paying for sponsorships. Now we need you. It's the club and the community coming together that makes this event so special. We are asking you to please purchase tickets. Tickets are $40 for an individual or $60 for a pair. This is a social event and the format lends itself very much to mingling. At the same time, we are offering reserved tables for up to 8 people for $350 for those who prefer to be seated that evening. Tickets will go on sale next week. You will receive an email via Club Runner with a link to purchase tickets online, or you can look for some ticket order forms on your table next week. Simply fill out the form and return it to Joyce Schmitz or Secretary Lynn and to reserve your tickets. We hope all Worcester Rotarians will join us, and we encourage you to bring friends, family, and other guests for a fun evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Welcome guests. Please know that you're always welcome back to Worcester Rotary Club in the future if you ever want to come back, and you're always welcome. Let's see. Yeah, at this point, I will turn it over to Bob Gorman, who will introduce our speaker. Bob.
Thank you, President Tom. Our speaker today, Mark K. Wiest, is a legend in Ohio judicial circles. At the time of his retirement as a judge of the Wayne County Common Pleas Court on January 1st, 2023, Mark was the longest serving judge in the state of Ohio, having been on the bench for 43 years. He started when he was 10, I believe. Being a successful judge takes patience, intelligence, and yes, judiciousness. As a measure of the respect he has in judicial circles, Mark has served as a sitting judge in more than 25 counties in Ohio over his career. It's a role he continues to fulfill in his retirement, and that is at the request of the Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court. As his career progressed, Mark developed a special expertise in attempting to settle cases without trial, either through a formal or informal mediation process. And since his retirement, he continues to serve as a private mediator. Mark has been a model of service to the profession. He has been on the Ohio Board of Bar Examiners for 25 years, including the last 10 years as chair. He has served on the Ohio Common Pleas Judges Association for more than 4 decades, including 36 years on the Board of Trustees and stints as president, secretary, and treasurer. He spent a decade on the Ohio Supreme Court's Commission on Continuing Legal Education, where he served as chair. Mark and his wife Karen live in Worcester and have 2 adult children. And Mark's mother-in-law, Donna Connolly, is a longtime member of this club. So please give a warm Rotary welcome to Mark Wiest.
Thank you, Bob. And Bob is gonna appear later in this program. You know him as an attorney, and some of you as a former staff member for Congressman Ralph Regula, but before that, he had another job you're gonna hear about at some point in this presentation. But thank you for the invitation. I get to dress up, that's something I don't do very often anymore. So what you see there is the Wayne County Courthouse, which most of you, I think, have either maybe been in. I don't know how many have actually been in it that aren't attorneys. Jury duty. And I want to thank the Wayne County Commissioners. I know there are one former and one new county commissioner for taking care of that building where I spent 40 years. Both inside and outside, they've been very generous with funding to maintain the courthouse in the condition that it's in. I only wish they'd been that generous when I brought my budget every year. So okay. So that was the nameplate on my bench in the courtroom on the second floor of the courthouse. And there's a story about that that I'll get to later. Just keep it in there. This was something I put together. I gave a talk to the Common Pleas Judges Association. And I just wanted to show how things have changed over the years. From when I started on Common Pleas Court in 1983, there were actually four judges who were women. And by the time of my retirement, it was up to 78 or 35%. And actually, that just includes the general division judges, which are the judges who do the civil, felony, criminal cases and civil cases. It doesn't include domestic relations, juvenile, probate, and there are far more women in the domestic relations and juvenile divisions than there are men, I believe. And right now, our youngest son is in his final semester of law school at Akron, and women are about 60% now. How did that work? All right. Is there anyone here that doesn't recognize either or both of those individuals, or is willing to admit it? Well, there we go. Well, you're going to get a little education. We're going to talk first about the man on the right. That is former Governor James Rhodes, four-term governor who finished his governorship in early 1983. The reason I put him up there is that the way I got to the Common Pleas Court is by him appointing me. I had been elected to the municipal court where I spent 3 years. And then a vacancy occurred in the Common Pleas Court when Judge Bill Sharp decided to retire early. And so when that happens, it's up to the governor to fill that vacancy. So Jim Carmichael, who many of you I'm sure know, former county commissioner, state representative, and longtime chairman of the Wayne County Republican Executive Committee, had just become the chair of the executive committee about a year before that. And so he was faced with, we have this vacancy and the governor's probably going to look to his party in the county for some advice. And so he happened to be and this is told to me by Jim Carmichael, he happened to be at a Republican function in Akron where the governor was going to speak. And it so happened that the two of them were standing next to each other in the men's room. If you can picture that. So Jim thought, well, this is a good opportunity to find out. And he asked him, Governor, we have this vacancy and you're going to have to fill it. What do you want? How do we go about this process? We've never had it before. And he said, Jim, just give me one person who can get reelected and won't embarrass me. So I got reelected. I don't know about the second part, but when you talk about how things have changed, Jim, we had a vote of the executive and the central committees, and I got the most votes. So he sent a letter down with my name to the governor's office, and that was it. No background check, no application, no interviews. And the process is totally different now. As Letitia Wiles, I don't know if she's here, I know she's in Rotary, and Ray Lizzie, who both got to the probate juvenile court by appointment. You have to fill out an extensive application. They want more than one name. You have to be interviewed once or twice. But back in that day, it was a little bit different. Now, who's the other guy up there? Anybody? Don King. Now, why would I put Don King up there? Well, part of it is kind of law related. And the other part is that when Governor Rhodes in December of 1982 was appointing me to the Common Pleas Court, he did something for Don King. He issued a pardon, which we've heard a lot about pardons lately. But Don King had been convicted of manslaughter by stomping one of his employees to death who owed him money. Don King at that time was in the illegal gambling business in Cleveland. They used to call it the numbers game. It's now known as the Ohio Lottery. And the odds were a lot better back in the numbers game. So he was issued a pardon. He had letters from Art Modell, Gabe Hall, Coretta Scott King, Jesse Jackson, George Voinovich supporting his application. And that gave him the ability to be licensed to promote fights in states like Nevada. Another interesting fact about Don King is that in I think it was 57, one of his rivals in the gambling world in Cleveland set off a bomb at his house. And he fortunately was not home, but he called a detective in the Cleveland Police Department and said, I think so-and-so is at this house. And I think you'll find him there. So the police went to this house, and the only thing they found there were some obscene materials and a woman by the name of Matt. And that case ended up, she was prosecuted for possession of obscene materials. The case went all the way to the US Supreme Court. And in 1961, they, number one, found that the Ohio law prohibiting possession of obscene materials was unconstitutional, but they also issued a ruling that the search, which everybody agreed was without a warrant and was illegal, that from henceforth, evidence that was secured through an illegal search could not be admitted into evidence in a criminal trial, which was a major, major decision. It's been watered down over the years, but Matt versus Ohio all started with Don King's house being bombed. All right, I need to move on here. And I'm going to talk about probably the most significant case that I was involved in during my 40 years on Common Pleas Court. And it happened to occur my first year on the bench, 1983, when I was 10 years old. July 17th, 1982, Krista Lee Harrison was abducted by a man driving a van from the Village Park in Marshallville. And that was the last time she was seen alive. Her body was found in a remote area of Holmes County. 6 days later, she'd been tortured, raped, and strangled to death. There was plastic material, a piece of plastic wrapped around part of her body. Her body was covered with orange carpet fibers, and her hair also. There was a pair of pants found near the scene, a pair of jeans that had brown and blue paint spots on them. The next day, and I don't remember exactly I think somebody must have reported it, but there was a large piece of cardboard, a blanket with orange, and both having orange carpet fibers on them. The box had been, the label had been blacked out with black paint, but underneath it said Sears. And there were some other things found at the scene. There was human hair attached to the blanket. And to make a long story short, I guess, it was determined that the plastic that was wrapped around her legs and the cardboard that they found on Fair Road outside of West Salem, those were used to package van seats that were made by that were sold by Sears. And they were able to determine that they went through a list of the sales from Sears in Northeast Ohio, and a man by the name of Robert Buell's name appeared on this list. He had purchased new van seats about 3 weeks before Krista Harrison was abducted. But this is in '82, July. Nothing really moved on the case, although they had this fiber evidence and the van seats until October of 1983, when a woman who Robert Buell had kidnapped and brought to his home in Summit County and had there for a number of days and left her handcuffed to the bed while he went to his work at the city of Akron. And she had been tortured in numerous ways. She was able to escape. And by the time Buell got home after work, the police were waiting for him. And they also determined that he had kidnapped another woman from Youngstown several months before that and tortured and raped her, but for some reason had taken her to Pennsylvania and let her go. So now that he was in custody, there was a search of his house. And in his house, there was a roll of orange carpeting. There was cans of paint. He had a van that had orange carpeting that he had installed. It had new van seats in it. And given my time, I'm just going to leap ahead and tell you that they were able to determine that he had installed this orange carpet a month before Krista was abducted, and had installed the van seats about a month before. They were able to match the paint on the jeans they found at the scene with the paint that was in his house. There was an article from the Akron Beacon Journal with Krista Harrison's picture on it that he had in his custody. And they were able to link these orange carpet fibers by both the BCI and the FBI experts to they were able to testify that these carpet fibers that they found in his van and his house match the ones on her body and on the evidence that they found on Fair Road in West Salem. And with that, and with some other physical evidence, because the whole case was physical evidence, they were able to indict him in October, or November. In the meantime, he'd been charged with these crimes in Summit County for the 2 women that he kidnapped. Those cases were resolved in January, where he entered a guilty plea and was given a sentence of something like 120 to 300 years. Our case was set to go to trial March of 1984. The defense had filed a motion to change venue because the publicity was unbelievable. the Daily Record, back when we had a newspaper that actively reported, every day, front page story, either about the Harrison case or about the cases in Summit County. It was front page every day, multiple articles. And so I ended up granting a change of venue, and we tried the case in Cuyahoga County over the state's strong objection, but it turned out to be a good move, I think. So we started the trial. We didn't have to reschedule it. We started it on March 19th. The staff in Cuyahoga County was unbelievably supportive. And there's, I don't know if you recognize Keith Shear. I don't know. I don't think he was like agreeing with what I was saying there, but and behind him is Martin France, who was the assistant county prosecutor, who then later was elected prosecutor, and Buell's attorneys, Jim Burden and Larry Whitney from Akron. So picking a jury in a capital case is different because you have to examine each juror individually out of the hearing of the other jurors as to their opinions on the death penalty. So it took a few days. We got a jury picked. The case was tried, and ultimately Buell guilty, faces chair. So the other thing unique about a capital case is that the jury has a voice in what sentence the defendant's going to receive, whether it be life or death. And you have a separate trial, separate hearing after he's convicted. And at that point, he was facing the electric chair. There's a picture of old Sparky. Another quick aside, in 1879, there was a murder at the old Wayne County Fairgrounds. And a guy named Callahan was convicted and sentenced to death. And at that time, executions were carried out in the county where the crime occurred. And hanging was the method of execution. And about a year later, after he was convicted, he was hung in the Wayne County jail, inside the jail itself. That was in 1880. 5 years later, the legislature determined that sending 1,950 volts through somebody's body was more humane than breaking their neck. And so that was the end of hanging. So Buell was, so that's Chris's parents. This was from the front page of the Cleveland Plain Dealer. After they heard the verdict that he was found guilty, the jury took 20 hours of deliberation. In fact, Mr. Harrison said he was ready to give up. He was talking about not coming back on this particular day. But he was found guilty. The other thing that occurred is once the jury started deliberating, I had to sequester them. And it was at the old Holland House Hotel in downtown Cleveland. The staff at Cuyahoga really helped tremendously with carrying that out. My bailiff, Jim Drake, along with my court reporter, Phyllis Klein, we commuted daily in an old American Motors County car to downtown Cleveland. But once the jury went out, Jim had to stay with them. And the night that they were first sequestered at the hotel, I got a phone call from him, and he said, they want to know if they can have a drink. And I said, sure, but Wayne County's not paying for it. So now we move from April of 19, obviously the jury came back with a verdict that he should be executed. And then the judge can either carry that out, or I could have sentenced him to life. You can't do it the other way. If the jury says life, I can't say death, but I followed their recommendation. And this is 18 plus years later, about 3 days before he was executed. And there was a story about Marshallville and how they were feeling at that time. And then he was put to death on the 25th of September, 2002. The legislature had changed the law the year before and replaced electrocution with drug. So he was drugged to death. Yeah, I'm really don't have time to get into this, but there was another case that was actually tried the year before Buell, year and a half before. There were two men, Rucker and Holbrook were their names, and they were indicted for the kidnapping, rape, and murder of Tina Harmon, who was a 12-year-old girl. Krista Lee was 11. And she disappeared from the village of Preston and was never seen alive again until they found her body at a remote area in Stark County. And these two gentlemen, Mr. Rucker and Holbrook, were indicted. And it turned out it was a big mistake. They were seeking the death penalty. They were both convicted, one by a jury, one by a 3-judge panel in 1982. And there was a story in the Beacon Journal in 1984, actually in January before the Buell trial. It's 7 full pages in the Akron Beacon Journal, and it goes through how the investigators and the prosecutors got it all wrong. It was not Rucker or Holbrook. They also, Tina Harmon's body also had a lot of orange carpet fibers on it. So Rucker was granted a new trial. I tried that case in June of '83. And just quickly, that was Bat Day. We had a bat right in the middle of the trial that flew into the courtroom. So that's Kyle Schwartz, the charge of maintenance, Keith Shear, prosecutor, and the coroner from Stark County who was on the stand when the bat arrived. Yeah, that's from the Daily Record. And there it is, in 2010. The Attorney General Cordray and Sheriff Tom Maurer announced that they have been able to submit, they had found semen on Tina Harmon's body. And there was evidence that had been preserved, and they were able to do a DNA analysis. And it proved, the result was that it was a 1 in 96 trillion chance that the DNA belonged to someone other than Robert Buell. So Rucker and Holbrook were facing the death penalty. They were locked up for a year and a half, and Buell was the guilty party. This was a case I tried in 1999, Greg Crawford. He had bludgeoned a man to death and then robbed him and So we had a death penalty trial in Wayne County that I was presided over, and the jury came back with a death recommendation. And in that case, I rejected it and I sentenced him to life without parole. And he's still in Chillicothe Correctional Facility, age 62 now. This is a book I actually bought at the Buckeye Book Fair, written by a former Beacon Journal writer who wrote a book about a man named Dale Johnston, who was convicted in early 1984 with killing his stepdaughter and her boyfriend down in Hocking County, and by a 3-judge panel. And the 2 guys on top are the ones that actually committed the crime. But he spent 26 years on death row. That's a picture of the courtroom. That was an article from the Columbus Dispatch. There'd been a bill introduced a couple of years ago to end the use of the death penalty. It was actually a bipartisan bill. Obviously, has not passed. And there have been no executions since 2018. There have been no executions since Mike DeWine became governor. I told you that second slide with the nameplate, that was actually made for me in Cuyahoga County when I tried the Buell case up there. They had it on the bench and I brought it back to Wayne County and I had it for all those years. Now, I said we're going to get Bob Gorman in this, and you're going to find out what his prior occupation was. Because I found an article in the Holmes County Farmer Hub that was written a couple of years after Buell was convicted. Now I lost it already, but anyway, here it is. The title is 2 years later, Harrison Crime Finally Has Answers. And it was written by the editor of the Farmer Hub, serving Holmes County since 1827, Bob Gorman. Oh, that's a judge friend of mine. That's from a presentation at one of our judges association on how to control defendants that are hard to control in the courtroom. So that was kind of a fun. I skipped over a court order because it's from 1972, I believe. But I had a man that came in a few years ago and he wanted to have his record expunged. He had been convicted of selling marijuana back in 1972. And he was a guy who raised a family, worked a really responsible job. And I'm like, you know, why do you care after all these years? He says, well, I don't want my grandkids to know about this. And the reason I brought that up, we talk about how things change and how laws changed. He had sold a small amount of marijuana at age 20, I think it was. And he was sentenced to not less than 20 nor more than 40 years in prison. That was the sentence back then for selling marijuana. And a sale even includes a gift. You don't even have to get any money for it. Fortunately, Judge Miller, who sentenced him, had the power to release him, and he only did about 6 months in prison. I think he was trying to get his attention, but you know, today you wouldn't get 20 to 40 years for selling marijuana. So I kind of rushed through the last part of that. But one thing I would close on is that in all my years on the bench, the one thing I came to realize, and I don't know when, but, and I didn't always follow this idea, but you have a lot of people who appear in front of you, witnesses, lawyers who aggravate the hell out of you, you know, murderers, rapists. But what I try to keep in mind, whoever it is that we are all children of God and deserve to be treated that way. So, thank you. Didn't leave much time for questions, but
Yeah, I think we have time for one or two.
get one from the lawyer. Louise, did you have a question? Okay,
Judge,
where are we? Ah,
I was just curious, the jury for 20 hours, what were they hung up on in the Bill case?
well, it turned out I think there was one juror who was having trouble being convinced, but when prosecutors put an indictment together, they include every alternative imaginable. So in this case, you had a kidnapping and a rape, and you can be receive the death penalty for committing a murder after kidnapping or after a rape. So he was charged with aggravated murder by reason of kidnapping, aggravated murder by reason of rape, aggravated murder by prior calculation and design. And it was confusing to them. You know, there's only one death. Why do we have all this other stuff in there? For some reason, they never asked, sent out a question, but that was part of the reason. I mean, I was getting a little nervous too, because one of the big issues there was the prosecution wanted to introduce evidence about the two women that he had kidnapped as showing a pattern. We call it same acts evidence. And I ruled that could not be used at the trial. And when they were out for 20 hours, I was, because I felt he was guilty and I didn't want him to walk, but so my reason was that I wanted the jury to make their decision based on the evidence of the crime and not something else that happened. I mean, you tell them you can't, just because he committed those crimes doesn't mean he's guilty of this, but it carries a lot of weight. And I also felt that would be an issue on appeal. And he had 18 years of appeals. I mean, it got to the US Supreme Court in at the end of 1999. They had him strapped up, ready to go at the death house. And the US Supreme Court gave him a last minute stay so he could pursue a couple other appeals. And actually, I had a hearing on there's a proceeding where you can post conviction, you can raise certain issues. And it came up that there was a couple of witnesses who'd been hypnotized. One of them was the boy that she was in the park with when she was kidnapped. And it was never disclosed to the defense that these witnesses had been hypnotized. And so I had a 6-day evidentiary hearing on that whole thing. But at the end of the day, this was a physical evidence case, and particularly the carpet fiber evidence was just so compelling. But there was the paint and the box that the van seats came in. That was impressive how they put that together. And the carpet fibers, there was only 12,000 yards of that carpet that was ever manufactured. We had a witness from J.P. Stevens in North Carolina who testified, and only 74 yards ever made it to Ohio. So I don't think Buell had very good taste in carpet. But anyway, that's the end of the story, I guess.
Yeah, please. Yeah, if it's possible, if anyone has any other questions, they can come up afterwards.
Yeah.
In appreciation of your time today, we give this our rendition of the Rotary Wheel with the four-way test on the back. Mr. Buell probably wouldn't pass any of those.
I was hoping for tickets to the bourbon and wine.
Gotta pay for those.
Do you allow Kiwanians?
Yeah, if they pay for the tickets, we do. So, next week, we will be hearing, from Scott Boyce, the CEO of Worcester Community Hospital, as hosted by, Don Noble. And with that, we stand adjourned. Thank you.